you about to start your working holiday visa in Australia, or you might already be there, might have started it already, or you might just be planning it? Today I'm going to give you some recommendations on where is best to visit, pretty much go through everywhere that I went during my time in Australia and give my honest review about whether you should go there, and also give you some must-see things that you must do in Australia during your time there. Because the reason I'm doing a video like this is because it's the sort of video that I could have done with when I first moved to Australia. I didn't really make any travel plans. I literally moved to Sydney with my mate and we lived there for about 4 months. That was literally all that we planned. I ended up going on my own separate journey from my mate, which I'll come onto in this video, and pretty much ended up doing most of the country of Australia. Pretty much did everywhere, I would say, apart from Melbourne and Tasmania, Canberra, and a few spots on the east coast. I did most places, most of the main places in Australia, which I will come on to. But yeah, I could have done with a video like this because I didn't know where the best spots were. I only really knew about Sydney and stuff, and I just moved there because it was the first place. It looked cool, the Opera House and everything on Bondi Beach. So I didn't really plan too much more. But after 4 months in Sydney, I did get a bit bored and was ready to go and do some traveling. And after 2 years in Australia, I realized that there was actually quite a lot of places that I liked even more than Sydney. So let's start with Sydney, as it was the first place that I went to in Australia. And like I said, I did get a bit bored in Sydney after about 4 months, but I wouldn't let that put you off, because Sydney is definitely a must visit. It's definitely a very, very cool city. I was actually there mostly in the winter. I did get a few weeks of sun at the start, which was so nice. I think Sydney in the summer definitely is a great city. It's a great vibe. Honestly, one of the most like picturesque cities in the world. Yeah, there's quite a lot going on along the beach and stuff. Bondi Beach is a great vibe, and there's also lots of other nice beaches around Sydney. Definitely wouldn't miss it off your list. Personally, it wasn't my favorite place that I lived. It was very busy and stuff like that, but definitely some cool sights. Seeing the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge when I arrived there was like surreal, because it's something that I pictured for so long. And it's also good for young travellers because it's the main city in Australia. There's so many backpackers there, young travellers. It's so good for meeting young people. After Sydney, I then flew up to the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast was something which I'd seen in pictures and it looked pretty sick. But to be honest, I was a bit disappointed on the Gold Coast. I didn't get to see all of it, but the place where I was staying, which was Surfers Paradise, I would definitely not recommend visiting. I was only there for about 2 days, and let me tell you, that was enough. The beach there is quite nice, but the actual Surfers Paradise area is very run down. Just had a bit of a rough feeling, to be honest. It can be quite good for nightlife, so if you're looking for a bit of a party vibe, then it could be good. I've heard the Gold Coast is pretty decent for lots of backpackers, so it could be a good place to meet backpackers, but in my experience, I really didn't like Surfers Paradise that much. Although I do hear a lot of good things about the rest of the Gold Coast, so probably would recommend checking out there, but what I've heard is you do need a car when you're there. After the Gold Coast, I did then go on to Brisbane. Now, Brisbane's a really cool city, which I would definitely recommend that you visit during your time in Australia. I actually think like the actual city, like I could potentially live there. The only thing that puts me off about Brisbane is the fact that there's not a beach in the city. The best thing about cities like Sydney and Perth and stuff, which I'll come on to, is there's a beach there, which makes the whole Australia vibe so good. In Brisbane, there's no beach, so that's the only thing that puts me off living there. But Brisbane's a great city. It's got great nightlife and yeah, lots going on. And I think Brisbane's a good vibe. Again, good for meeting other backpackers. So Brisbane, I wouldn't miss it off your list. After Brisbane, I then went up to do my farm work in central Queensland. I went up to a place called Bundaberg where I did my farm work. I wouldn't really recommend visiting Bundaberg because there's not much there, to be honest. However, the whole area of central Queensland, I would definitely recommend visiting. There's some amazing beaches up there. We did some really cool trips from farm work. We went out to some national parks and stuff. And yeah, some of the beaches up there are incredible because you'll see the most amazing beach, miles and miles long, and you'll be like the only person on the beach because some of them can, yeah, are pretty remote. So central Queensland, nowhere specific, but I definitely recommend visiting. A lot of people get a car and do a road trip up the east coast, which, yeah, would be so cool. A few places on my list still up there are the Whitsundays and places like that, Fraser Island, and a few other spots. Especially the Whitsundays look amazing. So I spent 4 months at farm work, and then after that went back down to Brisbane because that was the closest city. I then flew to meet my girlfriend in the city of Adelaide. I know, a bit of a random spot to start your travels from, like we did, but it was the start of a tour that we wanted to do, a bit of a route that we were doing on the Greyhound coach. Now Adelaide was an interesting time, because which I'll come on to, because we actually had 2 different experiences in Adelaide. The first time in Adelaide we spent 2 days there, and I'm not gonna lie, we loved it. Adelaide is such a relaxed city. It's very nice, the weather's amazing, the beaches are so underrated. By the way, Adelaide beaches are so much better than Sydney beaches. Really relaxed city, lovely little city centre, lots of nice coffee shops. There's a little place called Glenelg, which is so nice, a lovely little beach town. And we spent 2 days there and we loved it. Honestly, I wouldn't miss Adelaide off your list. It's a bit of a random spot, not many backpackers go there. It's definitely not your place to meet lots of travellers and stuff. But if you're looking for just a little nice little city break and just to explore somewhere new, I would definitely do 3 or 4 days, maybe even a week in Adelaide. There's some really cool like wine regions and stuff. One of the most underrated cities in Australia. After Adelaide, we went up to Alice Springs, which is right in the centre of Australia. Alice Springs is known for being the most dangerous city in Australia and one of the most dangerous in the world. But I wouldn't let that put you off visiting. I had an amazing experience in Alice Springs, and it was so cool being out there and seeing some of the Aboriginal culture and stuff like that. We went to Ayers Rock, which was unbelievable. Such a cool experience. I definitely wouldn't miss that Outback off your list, because yeah, it's such a unique experience. After Alice Springs, we then got the bus up to Darwin. So Darwin is right at the top of the Northern Territory, and we had such a good week in Darwin. Honestly, one of our favourite places in Australia. The town's literally surrounded by jungle. We went out to the national parks and saw crocodiles and swam in waterfalls and stuff. Like, it was amazing. And the actual town of Darwin is really nice. There's some really cool little restaurants and bars. The waterfront there is so nice, and they've got like a little water park and like a little lagoon you can swim in. And yeah, I feel like the vibe of Darwin, that was like our top holiday place in Australia. Definitely recommend going for like a week, relax and just enjoy being up there in the Northern Territory. Not that many backpackers and stuff go to Darwin. I think in the dry season it's more popular, but I definitely wouldn't miss Darwin off your list. Honestly, one of my top places in Australia. After Darwin, we flew to Cairns. Now Cairns, I'm not gonna lie, was one of my worst places in Australia. Not a horrible place, but I just felt the town was a bit rough, very industrial, and not that nice, to be honest. It is good for meeting other backpackers and travellers, because literally so many travellers seem to go to Cairns. It's a good spot to base yourself if you're going to like the Barrier Reef and doing the Daintree rainforest and stuff. Definitely some amazing stuff to see up there in far north Queensland. I think, yeah, that area of Queensland is amazing. The jungles, the beaches, definitely worth a visit. Actual Cairns town, however, I would say is a bit rough. Now, we actually planned to live in Cairns, and it didn't go well finding jobs and houses and stuff, so we decided to leave and we went back to, guess where? Adelaide. A bit random, but we loved it that first time, and we thought, why don't we just go back there? We didn't want to go to a massive city like Sydney or Melbourne, so we just thought we'd go back to Adelaide. And the first few months there were quite nice, but we ended up having a bit of a bad experience with having to live in the northern suburbs, which I'll come on to in another video. We got kicked out of our house and stuff, which was not ideal. But like I said, I would recommend going to Adelaide more for a visit than to live. And then after Adelaide, we had one more place on our list in Australia which we really wanted to visit, and this was Perth. Now, we flew to Perth from Adelaide and we ended up living in Perth for 9 months, and let me tell you, it was definitely my favourite place in Australia. Definitely my favourite place we'd lived. Perth is a beautiful city. There's enough going on that it's not boring. Some of the best beaches in the world. Yeah, some of the best weather we've ever seen. I think we saw rain like once in about 4 months during the summer. Honestly, I really want to go back to Perth, because if you're looking for a chilled out vibe and just the best place to live, I highly recommend Perth. There's lots of young travellers, lots of English people. It's the best thing. I loved Perth. People chat shit about Perth a little bit. They say it's boring. They say it's so isolated, but I'm not gonna lie, I didn't feel that isolated, and people only say it's boring because there's not much nightlife and stuff and things close a bit early, but when you move to Australia, you realise nightlife is not the most important thing. So Perth, honestly, top of my list in terms of places to live in Australia. I highly recommend it. Although one thing I do recommend is doing what we did and leaving Perth till last, because it's so isolated. You don't just want to visit Perth and just stay there when you've got the whole East Coast still to see. I'd recommend doing the whole East Coast and the middle because it's all relatively close. And then when you've kind of had enough of all that, then I'd go to Perth, which is far from everything. I wouldn't go Perth first because I feel like you're just going to get the urge to go and see everything else. So let me give you 3 places, 3 recommendations you should live, and then 3 things that you literally have to do. 3 places to live. Number 1, definitely Perth. Number 2, Sydney. Number 3, between Adelaide and Brisbane, depending on what you prefer. If you like a busier vibe, bustling city, lots going on, I'd say Brisbane. If you like a very chilled out vibe, still want the beaches, I would say Adelaide. 3 must-do things I would say is Ayers Rock or Uluru in the outback. People say it's overrated because it's just a rock, but honestly, it was one of the best experiences ever going out there, going to the middle of nowhere and seeing Ayers Rock, having a barbecue by the rock, like unbelievable. Number 2 is the crocodiles in Darwin, literally incredible experience. Getting like this close to fucking like 8-foot crocodiles is mad, so definitely recommend it. And number 3, I would say is the Great Barrier Reef, definitely worth doing. Yeah, one of the best snorkeling trips I've ever done. A couple of other little recommendations are Rottnest Island in Perth, some of the best beaches I've ever seen. So that's everything I did in Australia, my honest thoughts on everywhere I went. You might be able to get a few ideas from places that I went to go and visit yourself or go and live there for those of you who don't have an idea where to go in Australia. So there's a few options. If you need any other help, then leave some questions down in the comments and I'll get back to them. And yeah, subscribe to the channel and I'll see you very soon with another video.